Are you a real estate investor looking to sharpen your skills or a newbie looking to become one? You're in the right place. Welcome to Where Should I Invest? Real Estate Investing in Canada with your host, Sarah Larby.
Welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Sarah Larby and you are listening to Where Should I Invest? Today's guest is Craig Race and also Ryan Fernandes from landscape.ca. If you are curious about Toronto and Vancouver and all of the laneway houses happening in some of those big markets to make way for additional dwelling spaces and units, we are in for a treat today. Craig and Ryan have done many laneway houses in Toronto and are sharing some insights. The good, the bad, what to know, what to ask, what can be done, and many more. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast. And don't forget, we are having another Have Your Cake and Eat It Too live event in Markham. And we were completely sold out, event number 1. So we are doing it again November 30th. If you are interested in attending the Have Your Cake event with myself, Harry James, and some other awesome investors, a comedian, a band, we're going to make it an awesome event just like last time. And we're going to have different speakers, good food, good drinks. Again, send me an email, sarah@sarahlarby.com. Enjoy the podcast. Ryan, Craig, welcome to the show. How are you guys?
Great to be here, Sarah.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for having us.
Absolutely. So I'm really excited to bring both of you on because, you know, one of the topics and I think a potential future of real estate is laneway housing and additional dwelling units. And, you know, it's not so much the typical conversion anymore, taking a single family to a duplex, but, you know, really in order to make things work, even in terms of like additional cash flow in you know, this market with high prices, I'm really excited to talk about this option today because I think it'll help people with increased cash flow, increase after repair value, and all this good stuff. So before we get started, maybe Craig, I will start with you. Just a little bit of a background on who you are and how you got started, and maybe just a little bit of an overview of the company.
Sure. So I'm an architect. I've been practicing for not quite 20 years, and I've always been focused on houses. Like there's just something about small to mid-scale design that has really resonated with me. I think especially having grown up in Toronto, the majority of our city is that scale. So it's the parts that you interface with most, and I've always found it exciting. And laneway suites were an opportunity that you know, I first noticed in Vancouver, but have actually been something Toronto's been embracing for decades, if not centuries. So when we were able to be a part of bringing that new typology to the city, it was an opportunity we just jumped on and have been really excited about.
Awesome. That's great. And Ryan, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm currently an intern architect. Which means I'm in the process of becoming a licensed architect with the Ontario Association of Architecture. And I've been following along with Craig's journey and the other co-founders of Landscape for a number of years now. And I thought like what they were doing was really cool and provides a huge opportunity. Also, the fact that they're working with investors and kind of looking to do their own development as well was super appealing to me. So I joined the team just over a year ago, and now I'm helping to lead some of the design efforts at Landscape.
Awesome. And do you mind if I ask, are either of you guys investing in real estate, whether it's, you know, whatever the strategy is, potentially even using laneway homes, or are you strictly working on this for investors?
We both invest. Ryan and I, one thing that has always made us kindred spirits is that although we look at houses from a design perspective first, I think we both see like the value in it as well. So we've both got our own projects on the go, nothing formalized with Landscape, but our own little side hobbies that we enjoy doing.
All right, very cool. But I want to talk about laneway houses today. So what is it that Landscape does? What are you guys creating, and what's a laneway house? Maybe Ryan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, for sure. So laneway suites are essentially secondary dwellings that are constructed behind like traditional street-facing homes. And these properties abut public laneways. So at Lanescape, we focus primarily on properties exclusively on properties in Toronto right now. And essentially these homes, they can increase housing flexibility, animate underutilized spaces, and they provide housing options that are close to community amenities. So it really provides housing, which is much needed in areas that are really ideal places to live for families.
Can I ask, I mean, obviously you mentioned Toronto. I think Toronto is, it's become a very expensive market. So this is a good opportunity to potentially offset some of the rental, or, rent essentially one of these units out so you can reduce your mortgage. But, why only Toronto? Like, why haven't you guys looked at other markets at this point in time? Craig, what about you?
To be honest, we are looking at other markets. The real reason is because right now in Canada, only Vancouver and Toronto have policies in place for laneway suites with any kind of scale opportunities. So there are several other smaller markets that have approvals in place for garden suites and laneway suites, but the number of units that can be built in any city besides those two is pretty limited.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. So there's other types of units that you could build, based on Bill 108 and, other additional dwelling units, but not particularly laneway suites. So let's just take Toronto for an example. And, if something is compatible, what are some of the things to look for? If you've got maybe a house that you're living in and you're looking at doing something like this, what are some of the criteria that somebody should at least have maybe just do a quick check if it meets the minimum criteria before they go ahead and buy one of these?
Yeah, so I mean, to check your eligibility at the beginning, the main things are that the property, number one, has to be in Toronto, obviously. It needs to have residential zoning. And then you need to make sure that your property has at least 3.5 meters frontage onto a laneway. So those are kind of the main criteria. And then also you need to make sure that you have adequate emergency access for firefighters. So most often that's through like a side yard on the house. So you need to have a 0.9 meter setback from the main house to the property line, but also access can be granted through the laneway itself. And in Toronto, unlike some of the other cities, they've also unlocked a number of additional properties by extending the required travel distance it was originally 45 meters and now it can be 90 meters as long as you have like other design provisions in place.
Okay, maybe this is like a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Like, if you don't have a lane behind your house, are there ways around it?
Yeah, so if you don't have a lane, essentially you need to wait until garden suites are thing, okay. Right? So essentially that's kind of the main difference between properties in Toronto that would be eligible for laneway suites versus garden suites.
Okay, so you might have another option, just not exactly what you guys are doing. So what does a laneway suite even look like? Like if we're trying to picture this, I mean, obviously we can go to your website, but what are like the typical laneway suites that we see in Toronto that you guys are creating? Maybe Craig, you can answer that one.
So they vary in size. The smallest ones we do can be even 500 square foot, even smaller, like bachelor units. And anything up to the largest as of right design you can do is 1,700 square feet plus a basement. So that would be a 4 or a 5 bedroom, basically second house. And it's really contingent on the size of your lot and the amount of space you have in your backyard. The majority of them are 2 stories above grade. And like I mentioned, basements are possible. And they're always at the back of the property, normally with some kind of street frontage on the laneway so that the user of the laneway suite really feels like they're coming and going from the laneway, like that's their front door. Although the backyard can be shared between the main house and the laneway suite.
Okay, and how are like the utilities and everything connected? Do you have to connect them to the main house?
Yeah, everything's run through an underground trench. So anywhere your utilities come to your site at the moment, that stays unchanged. And it's up to the homeowner to submeter and branch out services underground to the laneway suite at the back.
Right. Okay, cool. So maybe let's just walk through like maybe some of the financials, right? Like what is this roughly range, maybe low end, mid range, high end price per square foot? Obviously there's a cost to bring in the utilities. There's a cost to build the pad or wherever it's going to sit on. And then based on that, if you can walk us through like what the lift looks like, ARV, is it usually 1.5, 2 times what you're paying, quote unquote? Obviously these are averages. And then what are you seeing for rent?
Yeah, so your all-in cost to build them, including soft and hard costs, is going to be about $350,000 for like the smallest unit you can imagine, like a small 1-bedroom. And the biggest ones can be up to $750,000, and sort of anything in between. In terms of the lift, that's something that is really untested in the market. If you assess these on a cap rate basis, they look really good. Like equity positive without even trying. They usually cash flow positive from day one. What the actual amount that's extractable from that will be kind of remains to be seen, because no one's really sold any laneway suites yet, at least none that are compliant with the bylaws. There's some precedent for mid-block sites that are on laneways, but nothing that's a secondary unit behind a main house.
All right, so this is still fairly new, and if anything, I would guess that I would recommend that people bring in an appraiser before they go ahead and actually pursue and complete the laneway house, so that ahead of time what that appraiser might go back, if you're getting it refinanced, what the appraiser may go back and say to the lenders. So it's quite interesting. And how do you finance these? Are people buying these cash? Are they, using like a HELOC or banks lending on something like this? Like, what are you guys seeing out there?
Yeah, debt is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to developing laneway suites. The majority of our clients already own their homes, and they probably have for a few years, so they have a good amount of equity that they're either using to get a HELOC or extend their mortgage or something. So most people are just using the residual value of their house to self-finance their laneway suite. Getting any kind of secondary debt in addition to your mortgage to build the laneway suite is proving to be a challenge, because that market valuation isn't very present yet. So it's really something that this works well for small investors who already own houses or just want to do small scale development behind houses that they're looking to purchase.
Yeah, or if you've got like a family member that's been living in Toronto for a while, and maybe you guys can joint venture and put a laneway house in the back, and figure out how you're gonna split the difference in the rents and all that good stuff. Obviously Toronto has, one of the things I think of as I think of these laneway suites is short-term rental and an opportunity to, furnish them and get even additional cash flow. But in Toronto specifically, and I don't know about Vancouver, I can't speak about Vancouver, but, there are limitations on how many days you can rent, something for. So, in Toronto, this could potentially be almost better for the long-term market. I don't know if I'm wrong, but what are you guys seeing based on your clients? Like, what are they doing with these laneway homes when they're buying them?
Yeah, so I think the majority of people right now are doing the Airbnb strategy. You can rent it out on Airbnb, assuming you're following all the rules that are in place for Toronto. So it has to be like your principal residence. And then, like you said, the number of days is important that you rent it out. So a lot of our clients are investor clients that have multiple units in the main house. And then they're adding the laneway suite as well as a way to kind of make the numbers work and cash flow. But also we have clients that are building these suites for their family or for aging in place, or let's say they have a child that's going to school, they might live there. So it's really a whole range of different scenarios.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's lots of different ways that you can slice and dice it and reasons to do it. So obviously, these don't just pop up randomly. I'm guessing they take some time to go through the permits and the whole process. Maybe walk us through what that looks like if we say, okay, well, we have a laneway, we have the opportunity to do something like this. Let's walk through maybe what somebody does from start to finish and timeline.
Yeah, so your timeline is about a year from the day you start working on it to the day you take the keys. Step one is getting a current survey of the property, which if you don't have, that's important for assessing how big of a footprint you can construct on and the like. Then step two is hiring Landscape, obviously, to deal with your design and approvals for very reasonable fees and very high quality service. But once you get your building permits in hand, it's a matter of tendering it out to a builder. Most of our clients go direct to a GC, and most home builders are perfectly capable of building this. It's smaller scale and fairly restrictive in terms of the availability of space on site. But to be honest, those aren't unusual things in Toronto, so it's something that almost any builder can take on.
Okay. All right. Awesome. So this is not like it's being created in the warehouse afterwards. Like it's like stick build. It's on site. You've got likely a BCIN designer or somebody also coordinating back and forth with city. So does the city inspector come on site then for every step, just like a typical like BRRRR deal or a typical conversion as an example?
Exactly. And you can prefab these. It's just a matter of, what system you employ for the construction. So the majority of construction in Toronto is just stick frame built on site, but there are a few companies who have prefab services that allow you to just tilt up once your foundation's complete. And you're right, these are inspected like any house construction. So you have inspections at footings and after framing and prior to completion and every step along the way.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a cool concept. I would just say, it's very new. Definitely, understand the upside, but also the downside and try to mitigate your risk as much as possible, right? So is there a way that you can get an appraiser working with you from the start so that, and you've got a lender and you've got your mortgage broker, because you might want to refinance these when it's all said and done, and you might not, that's cool too. But just to keep that in mind. And then what's the rental strategy, right? Or there might not be, right? It might be for your kids, but if there's a rental strategy, is it short-term? Is it mid-term? Is it long-term? What are the, bylaws or legalities around that based on the city that you're in? And I know Toronto's definitely got some limitations on that as well. What are some other things to note about laneway houses? Like what haven't we addressed yet that is important in order to make a decision on something like this?
I would really focus on the flexibility. One thing that's great about them is that if you are doing it with a personal residence or a property that one of your family members owns, or to accommodate a family member, you can flip that to a rental property with basically no difference. Like laneway suites can be suitable for combining with the main house use or separating for auxiliary use or a secondary rental. So that's pretty exciting about them. And also, one thing that, you raise a good point that you have to perform a lot of due diligence with your appraisers and your financing, but the sales market data might not be there, but the rental market data is there. And we're seeing these rent out for really high rental rates, like $3.50 to sometimes $5 a square foot. So it's pretty common for like a 1,000 square foot, 2+ den laneway suite to rent for almost $5,000 a month plus utilities. So it is possible to find like the revenue data out there and build your pro forma that way.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I'm looking at it, like where I could see something like this working is if you've got a house you're converting into, obviously it has to have the right zoning and everything, but 2 or 3 units, and then you've got this as well in the back. Are you able to make laneway houses more than 1 unit, or is there some rules against that?
No, definitely not. But oh my God, I can't believe I forgot. The one thing we haven't mentioned that is really critical to understand are 2 things. One is that these are development charge free. So development charges are indefinitely deferred on laneway suites, so you never have to pay that. And also, when you build a laneway suite, your parking requirement for a site goes to 0. So even if you've got a sixplex in the main house, when you go to build a laneway suite, you are only required to provide 0 parking spaces on a property. So for those 2 things alone, it gives a crazy amount of development flexibility for a site.
Yeah, I mean, actually, that's a great point. And development fees too can be quite expensive. So if they waive that, you don't have to worry about the parking piece. I mean, you might be near the subway, or I mean, Toronto's got good transit to begin with, so you can definitely do well there. Go
I
ahead,
was just
Ryan.
going to add one more thing. The parking piece, that's kind of specific to Toronto right now, but also some areas of Hamilton, for example, like in the downtown area. So, I mean, these bylaws kind of do vary from city to city, so you need to kind of get familiar with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in areas within the city, like I know, like, some areas parking in Hamilton when you're in downtown is not, as critical to have a spot per unit as it might be if you're out of the downtown core and vice versa. So it's definitely important to take a look at that. How many of these are you guys creating a year? Just curious.
So I think right now we've got about 15 in construction. We've permitted, I think, close to 50. So quite a few, and like our process at Lanescape is super efficient. So we're able to take on projects right away, and we can take on multiple ones at the same time.
All right, awesome. And it's strictly laneway houses. You haven't expanded into, or maybe you have, but you're like at this point in time, it's strictly laneway housing.
Right now it is, but we're also looking at garden suites. So that's something that's in the pipeline right now and will probably be implemented soon in the next few months. So once that comes around, we'll be offering services for that as well.
All right, cool.
We're also looking to expand into Hamilton because they've really started developing a nice laneway policy. So we're hoping that's a new market we can start providing services to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, now you're speaking my language. Once you start going into the secondary markets, I'm not that Hamilton's really secondary anymore, but it's not Toronto. I mean, Toronto was good to invest in, and I'm not saying it's not. If you're not like you just have to do you got to take something and you've got to cut it and you got to convert it into a lot of units for the Toronto market to work in terms of a cash flow perspective, or you got to have really deep pockets and put a big down payment down. But once you get into Hamilton, you get into other areas. They still make sense, right? You're still buying something, to me, that's a little bit more affordable. Your rents, again, like the numbers make a little bit more sense. So I'm excited if you guys are going into Hamilton and other areas for sure. Why should somebody go to you guys for laneway suites? Why not somebody else? Like, what makes you special or different?
I'll take that one, right? Really, it comes down to expertise. Like our company was literally created to produce the bylaws for laneway suites here in Toronto. Like we advocated for these since 2014, and we essentially co-wrote them with the city. So we know more about them than anyone else on earth. And it's also like practical experience. Like Ryan was saying, we've got over 50 laneway suite projects, either completed or in some phase of development, and we're pacing up as quickly as we can. So like the next biggest laneway suite design and approvals expert I know of has done like 2 or 5 maybe. So like no one has the depth of expertise that we have or the efficient process, like because we have so many done. We've got a highly replicable design standard that allows us to export our work fairly quickly.
All right, awesome. That's great to know. Very cool. So Craig, Ryan, the next part of this podcast is our lightning round. So you are each going to get the same 5 questions as all of the other guests, and you're going to give me the first answer that comes to mind. Are you guys ready to play?
Let's do it.
All right. So question number 1, Ryan, we'll start with you for this one. What is your favorite real estate investing book ever?
Yeah, so I think some of my favorite real estate investing books were the Don Campbell books. I found they provided like a ton of advice for strategy and tactics. And they, more importantly, they had a Canadian perspective. So like, while the Brandon Turner book on rental property investing is amazing, it's more US focused. So I really enjoyed the Don Campbell books.
All right, awesome. Craig, what about you?
This is kind of a cop-out answer, but my favorite real estate investing book is the zoning bylaws. I find that being able to navigate those efficiently is one of the biggest step ups to really unlocking the value of the property.
All right, very cool. And we're going to continue with you for question number 2. I don't know if you listen to podcasts, but it doesn't have to be real estate investing specific. If you have a favorite podcast, which one is it?
Well, I have several fantasy football podcasts that I love because that's like an appropriate type of gambling I enjoy engaging in. But if I had to pick one, I would say it's not related to that. Stay Tuned with Preet is my favorite because it's a really good objective analysis of American politics with a heavy focus on law. So I find it really enjoyable to listen to.
All right, awesome. Ryan, what about you?
So yeah, I also listen to like a ton of podcasts all over the map, but I really like the Tim Ferriss show. He interviews like all kinds of top performers in all different industries, and I find he's a really good interviewer. It's really interesting.
Yeah, he is awesome. All right, question number 3, Ryan, we'll continue with you. Other than real estate and anything to do with real estate, what is your favorite hobby or pastime? What do you do for fun?
Yeah, so generally, I mean, outside of a COVID year, traveling and trying new food, those are definitely my 2 favorite things.
Do you have a favorite type of cuisine?
Honestly, no. I mean, pretty much when I go to a restaurant, I'll just try whatever I haven't had before.
That's awesome. That sounds like me. Like the most like unique stuff is the stuff I usually go for.
Yeah.
Awesome. Craig, what about you? What do you do for fun?
Hanging out with my kids has kind of become my favorite thing to do. But if I weren't to pick that, I'd say go play volleyball.
All right, very cool. Craig, if you lost all of your money and your assets tomorrow, how would you start again?
This implies I have any money and I'm not just only assets, but honestly, I'd do the same thing I'm doing now. Like I really enjoy using design as a tool to unlock value in real estate. And I just get my architecture license again and start over.
All right, very cool. Ryan, what about you?
Yeah, I think similar to Craig, I'd definitely be in the same industry. I'd probably try and work and save up a bit of money and then put it in an investment property.
Very cool. And last question, Ryan, if somebody has $50,000 and they want to get started, how would you recommend that they spend that money?
Yeah, so I think, well, probably can invest in Toronto. But if you go to some of the smaller markets, I think you can definitely get started there. And I think a lot of education these days is free. So even though I'd be inclined to spend some of that towards education, I think you can get a lot of that by going through networking events and meetups and stuff like that. And then just use the money to put into like a property.
All right, cool. Great answer. And Craig, what about you? If somebody has 50 grand, what would you recommend they do with it to spend it wisely?
Fund design and approvals for a laneway suite behind your house.
All right, very cool. Ryan, Craig, where can my listeners reach out and find out more about you? Craig, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, so one thing we haven't mentioned is we do free property assessments for any property in Toronto. So send your address or addresses to listings or whatever you have to info@landscape.ca, and we'll respond within a day with an assessment for that property so you can see what its development potential is. Or just visit our website, landscape.ca, to stay tuned with us on social media for all of our advocacy and service efforts.
All right, perfect. And you said info@lane, it's LANESCAPE.ca.
That's right. Send us as many addresses as you want, but they're free and we love to do them. Or I should say Ryan loves to do them.
All right, very cool. And Ryan, where can listeners find out more about you?
Yeah, so I mean, for Lanescape, we're Lanescape on all the socials, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. And then for me, usually I'm just active on Instagram, so you can find me there.
All right, cool. And I think you're Ryan Fernandes 94 on Instagram. And then Craig, you are Craig Architect.
Craig Attacked. I'm an architect. My name's Craig.
Sorry,
Craig
I ruined that. All right, Craig Attacked. That's awesome. That's actually really clever. Clearly, I'm a little bit slow. I couldn't piece it all together as I was trying to read through all of your stuff, but that's awesome. Cool. Ryan, Craig, thank you for being on the show, and thanks for the insights on Laneway housing.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks so much for listening to Where Should I Invest with your host, Sarah Larby. Make sure to listen in next time. We'll catch you on the next episode of Where Should I Invest?